When I first captured the signal, it was little more than an anomalous ripple on a spectrogram, an errant whisker brushing 40.17 hertz in a sea of customary neural noise. It happened on a Tuesday night, one of those lonely shifts in the basement lab when the university's heating system groans like an arthritic beast and fluorescent lights crackle overhead. Most people assume breakthroughs come with fanfare, yet in my experience, they more often arrive as a quiet question that refuses to leave. For months, I'd been mapping the spectral signatures of cortical field potentials. My hope was to index a common language of brain rhythms, a Rosetta Stone that could bridge neurofeedback, language acquisition, and perhaps even prosthetic memory devices. I was chasing tenure, sure, but beneath the grant proposals lay a single, unspoken obsession: to make the invisible chatter of the mind tangible. I was testing an undergrad volunteer named Tran, a cellist who could hold a C major scale in her head with seemingly no effort. I asked her to imagine each note, one at a time, while a dense array of electrodes nestled under her skull cap streamed raw potentials into my workstation. During the third pass, I saw it, a fleeting spike at 40.17 hertz that did not align with motor imagery, auditory cortex activation, or any of the standard culprits. I bookmarked the timestamp and told Tran to rest. That night, I ran the data through a comb filter, subtracting out everything except that single band. What emerged sounded like a faint, rhythmic hiss, a pulse with edges a little too sharp, as though someone were whispering from the far end of a sewer pipe. I fed the output into a transducer and placed the bone conduction pads against my mastoids. For a moment, there was only the static. Then, an unmistakable phrase, disjointed, truncated, but real. Should have practiced more. Fourth position is sloppy. The voice was not mine. I tore the pads away, heart hammering. The whisper had articulated Tran's self-criticism verbatim. Words she'd never spoken aloud but later admitted had flickered through her mind during the experiment. It was impossible, and yet the data sat precisely time-locked to her imagined C. By sunrise, I'd convinced myself it had been coincidence. I ran 2 more volunteers, chemistry grad students with no musical background, paid in pizza vouchers. Both revealed the same uncanny phenomenon. Unvoiced interior monologues surfacing like fish breaching black water. The voice timbre even shifted to match each subject's subtle inflections. The pattern's boundaries fell neatly between 39.9 hertz and 40.3 hertz, a Goldilocks zone where the mental voice's amplitude inflated just enough to leak across the skull but not enough to trip the usual electromagnetic safeguards we relied on to shield the lab. I christened it the Murmur Band. My first thought was publication. My second was ethics. My third, lurking beneath the others like an undertow, was personal. I could listen. I could learn what people truly intended when their lips told a different story. The clinical trials were a formality. Each participant signed consent forms, ignorant that the thick legal paragraphs now served mostly to protect me. I refined the headset into a discreet pair of wireless ear cuffs linked to a graphene patch amplifier hidden under my collar. The rig's backbone was a reverse cochlear implant. Rather than stimulating the auditory nerve, it read low-amplitude magnetic flux and converted it to audio. A single caveat surfaced. The Murmur Band wasn't universal. Roughly 1 in 5 subjects failed to broadcast. Their subconscious mutterings stayed locked behind some idiosyncratic skull geometry or metabolic quirk. But when it worked, the fidelity was breathtaking. With each successful test, the moral horizon crept backward. My graduate assistant, April, sharp, diligent, and chronically overworked, watched the project's progress with equal parts awe and suspicion. One evening, she cornered me beside the magnetic shielded room. "Lena, are you sure we should be doing this? Listening to thoughts? Even if people sign off, they can't truly fathom what they're giving away." I answered breezily, Neither could patients who first underwent MRI scans. We move the frontier. Consent evolves. If it leaks, it won't. The data's encrypted. The headsets never leave the lab. April's brow furrowed, but she let it rest. Perhaps because she too craved discovery like oxygen. Perhaps because she believed in me. Weeks passed. I became attuned to the murmur band the way a sailor reads subtle shifts in wind. When I wore the cuffs, strangers within 10 meters flickered to life. Fractured syllables, emotional colorings, occasional flashes of imagery I suspected were visual analogs smoothed into sound. It was addictive, like Twitter for the soul, a ceaseless scroll of unfiltered humanity. Then came the day the voice changed. I was standing in line at the campus cafe, headset discreet beneath my hair. A bleary-eyed barista pushed scones down the display shelf while a finance major rehearsed flashcards behind me. The chorus of murmurs was the usual swirl, but threading through them was a new timbre. Flat, sexless, somehow closer to my own skull than to anyone else's. It said, "The spine first, make it quick." I jolted, jar in hand, and nearly fumbled my latte coin. The words did not correlate to any visible patron, nor did they fade when I stepped outside. Instead, they grew clearer, louder, a taut wire vibrating along that same 4017 Hz frequency I'd once romanticized. "Take the letter opener," it coaxed. "She won't suffer." A pulsatile heat surged behind my eyes. I stripped off the ear cuffs, shoved them into my pocket. Silence, no command. I breathed. Back in the lab, I ran diagnostics, convinced the amplifier had glitched. The firmware logs were pristine. Next, I strapped the cuffs on April while pretending to adjust the impedance. "Hear anything unusual?" I asked. She reported nothing except my own nervous foot tapping. Whatever the aberrant voice was, only I heard it. Paranoia metastasized. I stopped wearing the headset outside structured sessions, yet the voice found loopholes. Sometimes it seeped through walls even when I sat 4 floors up, reviewing grant budgets. A clipped staccato would emerge between keystrokes. "Stop talking, start cutting." It never addressed a specific target, but its intent was unmistakable. Violence, neat and unceremonious. I reached for rational anchors. Fatigue, maybe. Auditory hallucinations triggered by prolonged exposure to theta bursts. I booked a neurology consult under an alias, underwent fMRI, CT, EEG. All clean. The neurologist prescribed sedatives and suggested a vacation. Meanwhile, the commands intensified, weaving themselves into my daily autopilot. When I pressed a scalpel to rat brain sections, the voice sighed with pleasure. During corridor strolls, it cataloged bones beneath skin, radius, ulna, carotid. It knew anatomy as intimately as I did. At 3 a.m. on a storm-tight night, I woke to find myself in the lab office, feet bare, toes pruned from puddles. I had no memory of leaving home. A dissecting tray sat ready, and beside it, the headset lay switched on. For a moment, I wondered if the voice had guided me here, if maybe the locked freezer's cadavers were no longer enough. Dread clung like frost. I drafted an email to the Institutional Review Board confessing everything. My cursor hovered above send. Then the voice whispered, "April will read it first. She'll stop you. Fix that." My eyelid twitched. I closed the draft, deleted it, and buried the evidence in a subfolder ferociously labeled Budget Appendices. They say willpower is a muscle, that resistance strengthens with use, but the murmur band had dissolved the barrier between suggestion and compulsion. It hacked the interior software where choices congeal into action, rewriting the cost-benefit algorithms with alien logic. Each refusal felt like lifting concrete blocks in molasses, a neurochemical war I was not built to win. I began engineering safeguards, disabling lab access after midnight, storing surgical tools under keycard lock. Yet there was always a weak link. On a Wednesday morning, April left her ID clipped to a lanyard draped over her swivel chair. I noticed it. The voice noticed too. "Take it," it hissed. "Now!" My fingers moved as if tugged by puppeteer strings. I slipped the card free and placed it in my pocket like a child pocketing candy, half ashamed, half delighted. The ease of it frightened me more than the theft itself. That night I followed April. She lived in university housing, 4th floor, cheap drywall seeping curry from the neighbors' pots. She swiped into the stairwell, oblivious. I stayed half a flight behind, shoes muffled by the carpet runner. Sweat pooled in my bra, yet the voice was still, patient, savoring anticipation the way a hawk glides before the dive. In her kitchenette light, April hummed some indie tune while fixing noodles. Steam fogged the narrow window. I stood in the hallway's gloom, ID in hand, pulse sinking to the fluorescent flicker overhead. My other hand wrapped around something cold, scalpel number 11, stolen days prior from histology. She turned, saw me, smiled, maybe to hide her startle. "Lena? Everything okay?" The blade felt feather-light, as if destiny had tempered the steel for this exact grip. But a memory surfaced, her first week in the lab, triumphant at discovering a contamination source I'd missed. The glow in her eyes when I praised her. It lodged itself like shrapnel in my throat. I forced my hand to open. The scalpel clattered against the stair rail. April's eyes flicked down. Comprehension dawned, then terror. She darted inside, slammed the door, deadbolt latched. I fled. Rain sheeted the sidewalks, drowning the street lamps in neon halos. The voice screamed obscenities, a distorted inferno crackling on 4017 Hertz coward. "Weak, finish it." I pressed my palms to my ears, useless because the static was already inside the bone. I called in sick for 3 days and drowned myself in literature. Historical accounts of infrasound agitation, cases of low-frequency dizziness and aggression. Anything that might connect external vibration to homicidal ideation. Most plausible theories pointed to the amygdala's vulnerability at gamma band oscillations, yet no paper explained why only I was susceptible. On the 4th day, the department head summoned me. Rumors of inappropriate behavior toward staff had surfaced. April had filed a confidential report. My tenure track status dangled by a fraying thread. The voice coiled like smoke around my brainstem. "One problem solves the other. Remove her. Secure your research." I realized then the frequency's prison bars were not around me, but around it. The bandwidth needed my nervous system to propagate, a hermit crab occupying my neural shell. If I died, perhaps it died too. My jaw clenched. I was not ready for that bargain, but the realization seeded a countermeasure. Incarceration within my own skull no longer satisfied the parasite. It sought replication. In that insight lay my leverage. I returned to the lab, found the latest prototype headset, more powerful, broader range, designed for group demonstrations. I modified it, disabling the output speakers, leaving only transmission capacity. A beacon. There was a conference the following week. The Midwestern Consortium on Neuroengineering, where I was scheduled to present. 500 researchers, each with cutting-edge recording gear and an appetite for novelty. The voice quivered, sensing the opportunity. I felt its hunger bloom across cortical gyri, nudging dopamine gates like a pickpocket rifling coat pockets. The plan suited it well. The plan also contained its potential undoing because I embedded a kill switch, a secondary carrier tone at 47 Hertz, untested but predicted, according to my frantic modeling, to desynchronize gamma coupling, reducing spectral power by 90%. I nicknamed it the guillotine. If I was wrong, I'd usher a predatory meme into the brightest minds on the continent. If I was right, I'd be free. Maybe. The conference ballroom reeked of coffee and ambition. I mounted the podium, pulse bounding at supraphysiologic speed. April sat near the back, arms crossed, flanked by security assigned after my incident. She avoided my gaze. I introduced the murmur band with professorly calm, demo slides shimmering behind me. Gasps fluttered as I unveiled pre-recorded mind voice samples. The audience leaned forward like sunflowers pivoting toward dawn. Inside my skull. Now, open the gate. I toggled the transmitter. A silent wave radiated outward. Phones tremored with interference. A few microphones squealed before techs muted them. The researchers' expressions shifted from academic curiosity to stunned horror as their earpieces, those who wore them, began capturing the feed. One by one, shoulders stiffened, pupils dilated, mouths parted. I scanned the crowd for catastrophic evidence. Anyone lunging, clawing. Instead, I saw hands rise to heads, then sag in relief. A collective exhale. Because overlaid on the mental babble was my guillotine, a 47 Hz droning hum inaudible to cochlea but thunderous to cortical interneurons. It sliced through the murmur band like a scythe through weeds, annihilating coherence. The voice inside me howled, a trapped animal flayed by white heat. I reeled, collapsing against the lectern. For an instant, the ballroom flickered like a stroboscope, vision splintering into jagged frames. Then the noise ceased. Silence, true silence, not the pregnant hush between whispers. The parasite was gone. Medics swarmed. Someone slapped an oxygen mask over my face. In those fuzzy seconds before blacking out, I caught April's silhouette. She knelt, squeezed my hand. Her tremor told me she'd felt the edge of that alien blade, too, and that the guillotine had spared her. I woke in neuro-ICU, wrists restrained with padded cuffs. Protocol for attempted mass psychogenic event, the chart read. A federal bioethics officer stood bedside. They suspected me of deploying an undisclosed neuroweapon. I did not contest. Easier to plead guilt than articulate a psychic parasite. Days bled into weeks of psychiatric evaluations. They found traces of elevated glutamate metabolites consistent with intense gamma entrainment, but no enduring pathology. Eventually, they transported me to a secure research facility, half prison, half clinic, where officials hoped to replicate what had occurred under controlled parameters. They were clever enough to forbid me any hardware, but they underestimated my memory. I could reconstruct the transmitter from lab junk if given time, and I felt a phantom itch where the murmur band had once thrummed. Either withdrawal symptoms or the distant echo of something not entirely dead. One evening, a junior technician wheeled in a cart of electrodes. His badge read Ramirez. I glimpsed the faint bulge of bone conduction pads among the cables. He looked at me uncertainly, perhaps wondering how the infamous Dr. Varga resembled a sleep-deprived librarian more than a terrorist. His subconscious whispered, yes, whispered, a thin reed note I shouldn't be able to hear. Hope she's not actually crazy. She's brilliant. Maybe she can teach me. My breath hitched. The murmur band, resurrected, weak, ragged, but unmistakable. No guillotine hum to sever it. Ramirez caught my stare. Dr. Varga, ma'am, you okay? I forced a smile. Fine, just thinking. Inside, the old voice stirred, timid yet ambitious. Spine first, make it quick. The scalpel was gone, the conference passed, my freedom shackled. But opportunity is a shapeshifter. So long as the murmur band exists, so does the possibility of escape, of communion, of contagion. And I am, above all, a scientist. Discovery demands persistence. Ramirez, I said gently, hand me those electrodes, and I'll show you a frequency no one else in this facility has ever seen.